Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this event. I am Business Service Manager with Virginia Department of Small Business and Supplier Diversity. And on the behalf of the department, I would like to welcome everyone. We are all about diversity and inclusiveness. It is my pleasure to introduce Kathy Dolan. She is the Director for Business Development and Outreach team. She's the person who helped us and guide us throughout the process. So please, Kathy.
Thank you, Roman. And welcome, everybody. What a dynamic program ahead of you today. I can't wait to hear all the information. For those of you who may or may not be familiar with our agency, we are Virginia's small business agency. So it's Virginia Department of Small Business and Supplier Diversity. And what we're really about is we are here to enhance growth opportunities for Virginia small businesses to prosper through increased revenue and job creation, thereby raising the standard of living for all Virginians. So why do we do this? Well, besides it being the right thing to do, in Virginia, over 99% of all businesses are considered small. You heard me right, over 99% of all businesses. So if you're a small business, please know you are the economic engine of the Commonwealth. There are three key functions that our agency does. And if Ramen is your business service manager contact, he can fill you in on all of these. But we do certifications that certify, you apply for the certification. You don't register, you apply. And the information is reviewed to see if you qualify as a small, woman-owned, minority-owned, one or all three, a combination of any of the three. And if you are SWAM certified, that can enhance your probability of getting contracts with Virginia government. I will also say many local governments in Virginia use that SWAM database when they're trying to procure, because we all know if we're opening opportunities for SWAM businesses, we all benefit because the economy becomes stronger. So we have our certification team. We have the business development and outreach team, which really hits on a lot of things. We do an enormous amount of webinars and seminars and conferences. We do a lot of one-on-one business consultation. If you're interested in applying for SWAM, the business services managers, just like Ramen, can assist you in applying. But once the application's done, it heads over to the certification team for their review and approval. We also do those one-on-one consultations. And we also have a really phenomenal program. If you're interested, go to our website and look at the minimum criteria. And I don't want to discourage anyone, but if you don't meet the minimum criteria, wait until you do, because we're only looking at applications, but it's for businesses who have been in business for at least 3 years, revenue between 250,000 and 10 million, SWAM certified, of course, and one other person in your business. And so we take these businesses through application and interview. We select 16 and they go through a 6-month program where they scale their business. They don't just grow, they scale their business. It is a phenomenal program. The curriculum comes from a company out of Boston called Enterprise. Many entities across the country have this program and they call it something different. We call ours New Virginia Scaling for Growth. The U.S. Small Business Administration, other than the one in Virginia, has this program. They refer to theirs as Emerging Leaders. Most across the country charge participants to be in the program. Ours is at no fee. So, and we are the only state government in the country that offers this program. So if you have more questions, Ramen is actually serving as the program manager for this current cohort. So he can answer your questions. I'd be happy to answer them. So please let me know. We also have a financing division in our agency, the Virginia Small Business Financing Authority. They have a number of lending options. They have direct loans, guarantee loans, microloans, child care programs, bonding, and more. I do want to make you aware of a couple of things. Our agency, we're really tiny. We have about 40 people. And Virginia received initially $70 million to assist small businesses with the COVID crisis. And so we opened that application window August 7. And we later received an additional 20 million and an additional 30. So all in all, we had $120 million to disperse from August 7 to December 31. I'm really proud to say that all funds were dispersed. Those were grants, not loans. Those were grants. I will be very candid with you. There were way more businesses that applied than the funding allowed. We ran out of funding. So we are hoping that something may come down the road soon. And so we'll keep you posted on that. The other one last thing that I'd like to bring out is our agency spearheaded a disparity study last year. And the results have recently been released by the governor within the last 2 weeks. If you go to the governor's website, you can find that. And I think what we'll say, and I'm not at liberty to say too much, but I believe that we will certainly see some proposed legislation coming out regarding that, because those of us who have worked in this arena for a long time have felt like, in Virginia, we could only do set-asides. Now, you might be SWAM, but we could only do set-asides if you had that certification as small. But we realized that a lot of women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses weren't necessarily getting their share of the pie. We knew this from our day-to-day work, but you can't just say, well, I have a feeling that. So therefore the study. And the study has in fact proven what we noticed all along. So I think we will see some proposed legislation coming out. I would say follow the General Assembly. They're really going to only be in session a short time. This is a short session, but I think that there will be some legislation, and I can tell you if it's proposed and passed, you will certainly see notices on our agency website. So I'm going to post my email in the chat. So if anybody has any questions later, you're welcome to reach out to me, and I hope you all get the most that you can and ask lots of questions. We are really fortunate to have Kemi Joseph with us today. Now, what a rich resource for all of us. So please take advantage of this opportunity and make the most of it and enjoy yourself. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you for explaining it in detail. Now I would like to introduce our partner, and she is a great person. She knows a lot about supplier diversity. She is with Virginia Tech. She is Assistant Director of Supplier Opportunity. So if you are interested in doing business with the Virginia Tech, so she is your person. Daisha, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Raman. So my name is Daisha Holmes, and I am the Assistant Director for Supplier Opportunity in the Procurement Office at Virginia Tech. Thank you all so much today for having me for this exciting opportunity here. So in complete alignment with diversity initiatives across our campus, and in the Commonwealth, Virginia Tech is committed to the establishment and strengthening of our small businesses. So the university's purchasing staff, we strive to employ well-developed business processes that provide training and information to basically establish a great framework for conducting procurements to those who engage in delegated small purchasing. And one thing that I do want to highlight is our new tool that we implemented across campus is called our SWAM search tool. So if your business is a SWAM business with the state of Virginia, then you're basically in this portal that we created, which is super cool. And the campus have really responded well to this. And this is where they go to look for SWAM businesses. And not only our campus, but also other VASCP schools as well. And I will make sure to put that link in the chat box, and also my email as well if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I would really like to introduce a little bit about our speaker, Kemi Joseph. He is on mission to help 5 million business leaders advance in equity in their organization. So that is a big mission he's on. He helped purpose-driven business executive leverage equity as the pathway to prosperity. And I would like him to take over from here. and give us this detailed training that will be extremely helpful for all of our businesses.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, all three of you, for the opportunity to speak with everyone, as well as for the work that you're doing beyond this conversation, beyond this training, to really support the small businesses in Virginia and to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so as we dive into this, as you already said, we're on a mission to help business leaders and purpose-driven business leaders. And what's beautiful for us as we dive into this, for us, purpose-driven business leaders, it's not necessarily about the title, right? Your title might be that you're a founder, an executive, a small business owner, a vice president of people, culture, or DEI. But go ahead and type your title in the chat. I want to see what titles show up in here, because when people are spending their time on a Thursday afternoon, regardless of your title, we see that we're driven by a purpose to make a difference. And generally, we are starting business to make that difference in the world. And the reason we choose to work with purpose-driven business leaders, because we understand that on this mission to help 5 million leaders advance equity in their organizations, we start to create a place where employees can live safely and thrive. And the reason that we're here talking about building a crisis-proof culture is that we all are still living through what COVID has brought to us since last year. And we're business owners over here too, and it's interesting to see the struggle and to see that struggle amplified by the racial tensions that were happening in our country, and the way that that affected our organization, our businesses. You know, I was traveling about 150 days in 2019, speaking all over the country and different parts of the world, and it was a phenomenal. And you know, mid-March, that all got shut down. Did anybody else's plans get derailed? March 15th, that mid-March mark, derailed completely. So we shifted from speaking out in the world to jumping online and actually helping other people to go online. And that we actually were, by mid-May, getting ready to roll out a virtual training to help people to do engaging, we call it 5-star virtual engagement online. And what's interesting is I've been in hundreds and hundreds of Zoom calls last year, but I will always remember the Zoom call that we had on May 26th. For those of you who are tracking along and remember, on May 25th, George Floyd was murdered. And it brought so much out into the open for so many people. For me, it was a lot of pain, frustration, anger. It was just, I don't want to necessarily go back to how I was feeling then, but the reason I share that is on May 26th, the day after, we were having a team meeting. And our team meeting, we're getting ready to launch this 5-star virtual engagement plan that I was just telling you about. And in tears, I'm telling my team, it doesn't feel appropriate to launch this. Instead, let's get back to the DEI work that we are here to do. And through all that frustration and pain, and my team experiencing it different than me, because I'm the only one in my team who's here in the US, folks are in other parts of the world. But regardless of their skin color, regardless of how they were affected by the news or what was happening in our country in the US, my team said, all right, Cami, let's do it. We support you. I don't know if you've ever done a last minute change on a product or some big initiative, but to have your team support in that is such a pivotal thing that I've had a chance to experience. And of all the chaotic things that happened last year, there were some benefits that came out of 2020. But for me, the greatest thing that I got, the greatest thing that I continue to experience is working with the team that I currently have. And so a couple of them are here on the chat, so are here on the call. So please give them a brief round of applause. And I say all of that because as we've been working with organizations around the country, that trust that we have in our team, we found that that's an anomaly. Not many organizations have that same level of trust that makes the organization crisis-proof. Means that we get affected by the crisis, we get knocked down, we get hit down, but we can bounce back. So when we talk about building a crisis-proof company, beyond the products and how we diversify, we're talking about how we're building trust within our teams, especially when we have diverse teams, knowing that this world continues to diversify. That's what we're here to talk about. when we talk about reaching 5 million people, there are over 200 million businesses in the world. And what's interesting for us, 5 million represents 2.5%. So for anybody who follows the innovation adoption bell curve, it's important to know that 2.5% are the innovators. They're the people who are leading the conversation. And the reason we're saying they're leading the conversation because the conversation around diversity and inclusion has only been around for about 60 years. It's only been around for 60 years, where the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion has been around for 20 years. This is part of the reason that it's so confusing and frustrating. I mean, have you talked to a 20-year-old this year, right? Somebody who's in there, even as a person in their 20s, is going to be confused, frustrated, going to be anxious. So we're talking about DEI as a culture, DEI as something that permeates to different parts of our business and in the world. It's understandable why folks don't get it, why there's a lot of resistance, why there's even frustration. And so it's important that when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, just even in bringing those three words together, we're already having a conversation that many people are not having. And the beauty of this is, for us, we want to make sure that we move this conversation forward. So do me a favor, type the word forward in the chat if you want to go forward instead of backwards. I definitely want to go forward, especially in 2021. I want to go forward, not backward. So as we go forward, I'd like to offer you the difference between diversity and inclusion, and diversity, equity, inclusion. Is that equity is where we start to get the true empowerment, because it is about bringing diverse people together. Yes, it is about including them, but it's also about making sure that we're doing this in a fair and impartial way. Otherwise, people again get left behind, or they feel like they are going backwards in their life. So for us, if we like simplify this, we say equity is just being fair. So as we go about helping organizations advance equity, we want to make sure they're bringing that into the diversity and inclusion conversation. Because as we do this, as we help 5 million leaders advance equity in their organizations by 2030, we also make sure that their employees live safely and thrive. And because we saw COVID taught us a lot, that the business world affects the whole rest of the world. So as we create these workplaces where employees live safely and thrive, we create a world where every human being can live safely and thrive. So that is a big mission that we are on. That fires me up. And as we dive in for this next 45 minutes or so, where we're going to just do a little bit of that, just a little bit of that on this process. So with that being said, the objectives here are so for you to learn how to measure trust in your company culture so you can advance equity without offending people or making it worse. If you just get that alone, that's going to be worth this time together. We'll take it a step further. We want to help you make the most out of your DEI initiatives so your team can create the right solutions for the right strategies for the right solutions at the right time. And finally, how to engage more of your employees in DEI as a positive experience. And that way you can empower them with the high impact, low burden skills they need to reach your goals. And this last one is, as equally important as all the other ones for us, because when we say have it as a positive experience, for a lot of people, diversity, equity, inclusion is a conversation that becomes very intense, and that people have, a lot of resistance or straight up animosity or resentment towards, because the way the conversation has happened in the past. And for us, we understand that it is fair to know that people would want to run away from this conversation. So the fact that you chose to be in this conversation speaks volumes to you. And because we know so many people want to run away from the conversation because of our fears, our organization is called Fears Advantage, to turn this conversation around. Instead of letting fears divide us, we know the world, we're in a pandemic of fear as well, that there's more fear in the world, which is why there's more division. We want to help people use their fears to fuel extraordinary actions, relationships, and systems instead. This is how we use our fears to our advantage. Now, for this talk, we're only going to focus on the systems portion, because we want to help you actually build this out in a systematic way. And this is going to be a conversation that's both motivational and practical. So as we go through this, you will walk away with strategies that you can utilize right now. So as we talk about systems, we want to teach you our cultural equity accelerator framework. We're teaching you how to assess in your organization, how to strategize to make sure that you can start to reach your goals, and to train your people to be a part of this conversation, to be a part of this initiative, and also to celebrate. As I said before, a lot of DEI initiatives we only sell the work, and nothing else on the planet is sold that way. For example, you talk about going to the gym and we're trying to work off our COVID weight, right? The gym sells you life after the push-ups and after the sit-ups. It doesn't sell you that you're going to only be doing work. But DEI is one of the few things that we sell as just the work. So we also want to make sure we can celebrate the progress that's happening and have this as a complete action system. It's like an operating system for DEI in your organization. So as the world accelerates, if your head's spinning, just know that you got to make sure you have internal structures that are going to spin smoothly as well. So as we dive into this, we're going to first go into assess, and one of our core beliefs is that you have to assess instead of make a mess. Assess instead of make a mess. And what's interesting for us when we go in to talk about DEI, a lot of people define it differently. If you try to look for what is the one definition of DEI, Google will show you an image like this, where it's like, nope, we don't got one definition for this. So it's important that as we go in to do assessment, we want to make sure we're first talking the same language and helping people understand what is our vision of DEI in our organization. What does that actually look like? What does that mean for us to grow and change together as the world diversifies? And there's been a lot of talk about inequities, and I love that you mentioned the report, and as you were finding the inequities that are happening, and we hear terms like racial equity, and what does it mean to empower people based on their race? And again, that's a conversation that becomes very tricky, and there's a lot of social issues that are tied into it. So as we're talking about assessing this first portion, I want to help focus your attention on where you have the most influence. And so instead of us talking about what gets in the way of DEI or what gets in the way of equity, we want to discuss what are equity pathways that we can help to strengthen so people, regardless of their background, can get what they need. So for example, having health and mental health equity, family equity, social relational equity, spiritual equity, housing equity, environmental, education, economic equity, career equity, legal equity, and governmental or governance equity. Now, right away, we've been calling this the equity pathways. When we see something like the murder of George Floyd, this is really in this place of, we're talking about social inequity, we're talking about governmental and legal inequity. So for some of us, like, wow, this conversation is so complex, we don't know where to get involved, especially as a business leader. You're like, okay, my business didn't do anything to make that happen, but maybe my business isn't working to help the social issues either. We're saying, yeah, because a lot of times our business is here, that the thing that we are most responsible for as business owners and business leaders is providing career equity, to make sure that people are aware of what our organization is doing and how the mission that we're on and how we can improve communities. They have access to be able to apply for our jobs and have a fair opportunity to actually be a part of our organizations, that they're being hired, that when that's when they get that opportunity, that when they join our organizations, that they're actually safe, right? And they actually are protected as another human being because we hired them. Then they also get a sense of belonging because they're included in our organization. They also get the resources to actually do their job. And then they keep on building when we talk about development, that they can grow as leaders in our organization and they can actually advance to positions of leadership, right? So that way we're seeing the call for action right now is to diversify the leadership so people can actually advance to those levels. And then they get a chance to operate with autonomy and ideally leave a legacy in your organization. And what's interesting is if we're just focusing on career, as a business owner, this is where you're most responsible for. As a social entrepreneur, as a social person, you may want to get involved in all these other pieces, absolutely. But I'll tell you, if you really focus on making sure your organization is fair, that your organization is navigating diversity, equity, inclusion, and you grow this pathway, you actually, in return, help people to strengthen the equity pathways in the other areas of their life. So although you may not necessarily be actively working in all those areas, by giving people a pathway to grow and thrive in your organization, you are helping. The reverse is also true. That if your organization is stunting growth, you also are stunting growth in other people in other areas of people's lives. And I imagine that most of you are on this call want this instead, because it also gives you the freedom and the autonomy. It also lets you leave a legacy. So for now, we're only going to focus on career equity, especially that we're here talking to business owners. That way, this is how you first of all start to make sure the conversation doesn't get wrapped up in all the politics and the other social issues, because we're just focusing on what we can do in our organization. And right away, as we start to assess that, people, it starts to lower defenses and people say, okay, we can do this. It's actually approachable. We're not trying to change the world. We're starting with changing our organization, knowing that we continue to make a positive impact in the world. So do me a favor, type the word impact in the chat if you're rolling with me, if this is all tracking with you, right? And as we continue on, this will be the ideal, right? This will be ideal to be able to provide career equity. We have to acknowledge that there's a lot of gaps. And when we start to understand the gaps, we can work to close them. For example, when there's a gap of awareness or access, that oftentimes becomes a recruiting DEI gap. When there is a gap in giving people opportunity, there's a hiring gap, right? When there's a gap in safety, it's a protecting gap. When you have inclusion gaps, people don't feel like they belong. When you have funding gaps, people don't have the resources that they need to actually move forward, again, do the job that you're paying them for. When you have training gaps, people are not developing and growing in your organization. When you have advancement gaps, people they have these glass ceilings where you tell them they might be able to advance, but they don't actually see the pathway to do so. And when you do not have the ability to have autonomy or people ability to leave a legacy, you have an operating gap in your organization. And for us, as we talk, this is all under the assessment section to figure out what is actually happening in an organization. So as we seek to assess, we understand that this is what truly is stopping an organization from thriving, is that they have a lot of these gaps happening at the same time. And for anybody who's been working on DEI, you know it's very interconnected and complicated. We are trying to show it as simple as we can to make this approachable and actionable. And what's interesting is when we start to close those gaps, we can change how our organization feels and also how it operates. This is how we create a crisis-proof culture. This is how we create a crisis-proof business. So these are the 8 essential areas that we help every organization navigate through to make sure that you have as strong of a culture as possible, and it continues to evolve. And the beautiful thing when we talk about assessing, I'm going to give you a series of questions that I want you can screenshot it once all the questions are on here. So for example, when we're talking about career equity, how fair is our organization for, and you can enter the blank. So you might say, how fair is our organization for marginalized people, for Black people, for white people, for women, for right? So you can keep filling in the blank, whatever you need to. And notice it says how fair versus is it fair, is it not fair? We want to continue to increase how fair it is. So if it's really fair for one group, fantastic, keep that going and build upon that. So next, we want to say, what can we measure to find out? And I love how we kicked it off talking about measuring. You can't just go with your gut feeling. Let's measure and assess this. And then how do we act on that information? How will we act on the information we gather? A lot of people struggle to build assessments because they don't necessarily know what they're going to do with that information. When you start to think about what you're going to do, like start with the end in mind, so to speak, that gives you ability to pick the right information that you want to ask your team to get a good head start on how to use that information. And how will taking action on this information help our team? The more you can think this through ahead of time, the better your initiative is going to be. How do we ensure people's privacy as you gather their information and their data? How can our assessment questions be more inclusive? This is one of my favorite questions. It's something we've been doing recently. When we ask for demographic information, we don't do the other box. The other box, if you've been in the other box, you can understand how frustrating it is when it's like, okay, what is your ethnicity? And they might list a couple categories and you're not in there, so you have to choose other. It's like, man, it sucks. Right at the top of the assessment. No. That is going to kill my engagement. I'm going to be very disengaged. So instead, we leave it more open-ended. So we might say, in terms of your ethnicity, how do you identify? Just let people type it in. In terms of your gender, how do you identify? Let people type it in. And all you have to do is do that in the beginning as you're starting to collect data, because then you can start to track it and disaggregate your data. But it allows people to feel like they can be themselves, even in an assessment. And these small things allow it to be more inclusive. And then from there, we were talking about how does our assessment fit into our strategic goals? So we will share a little bit more about that in the strategy, but it's important that we are aligning it with our goals and our bandwidth to make sure that we use that information. And then how do we share and debrief the data? And when we have these data points, how are we sharing this information with our team in a transparent way? And also how are we debriefing it to make sure we can have a conversation that lets people see how they're contributing to the pros and the cons. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of what those questions may look like. Go ahead and screenshot this if you want to be able to capture this, because we don't generally send slides out of our presentation. We'll send you a recording of this, but if you want this, you can go ahead and screenshot it right now. And we will continue moving, because people say, oh man, my team doesn't like to do assessments, or sometimes people don't answer honestly. Well, we'll tell you that it's probably because there's a lot of mistrust in the organization, and mistrust is the most expensive problem a company can have. The most expensive problem a company can have. And it's important that when we're talking about trust as a whole, let's look at it more on a big picture, that yes, it's trust between your employees, but it's also trust between your investors, your customers, your vendors, right? We're talking about supplier diversity here, your suppliers. If you're running any kind of nonprofit, it's going to be your board of directors and your donors. So it's important that we're in a time where trust is so easy to lose. And when we're not actually talking, we're not actually having conversation, the gaps get wider and wider. John Gordon says that when there's a lack of communication, negativity fills the space. So this is why we talk about debriefing, actually sharing the data, because when there's a lack of transparency, negativity fills the space and that gap just keeps getting bigger. So when we're talking about trust here, we're going to say that diversity, equity, inclusion is what can increase trust in your organization, but can also decrease it when you don't have diversity, equity, inclusion. And diversity, equity, inclusion shows up as our behaviors. Yeah, we can talk a lot. And most people say, I want to move beyond talk. Yeah, because a lot of people are stuck in talk. So it shows up in the actions that we do. How are we showing up? How are we setting our goals? How are we setting ourselves up for success? So if you can get this equation here, that trust plus or minus diversity, equity, inclusion times your behaviors equals your culture. This is wild, right? This could we could be like, all right, bye everybody, that's great. You take that alone, that would be fantastic. And so folks are starting to ask us, okay, how do you actually measure this? This sounds great, but how do we measure this? A lot of folks will measure this through employee engagement or the employee experience. And what's interesting here is that your employee engagement, your employee experience will always be equal to or less than the level of trust in your organization. Your employee engagement will never be higher than your level of trust in your organization. And what's interesting is this is not just our philosophy. We also follow Gallup. And what's interesting is Gallup says across the world, 85% of employees are disengaged. No one's falling out of their seat, right? I can see, all right. No one just be like, oh my God, this stat blew my mind. No, because we're like, yeah, that makes sense. And that's the part that blows my mind. We're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. We've been into companies where we've talked to disengaged employees, like, well, that's terrible customer service. But if we're being honest with ourselves, a lot of us have been disengaged in jobs. We know if we don't trust the company, why are we going to give our best? It doesn't even make sense to give our best. We're working while we're looking for other jobs, or while we're trying to start our side hustle. The idea that side hustles even exist, that is a disengagement problem. I'm trying to hustle on side while you're also paying me. So for us, this is where we start to make that business case, where if you look at 85% of employees being disengaged, Gallup would say that for every employee that's disengaged, they're operating at a 34% deficit of productivity and profitability. So let's imagine that the average salary in the US is $60,000. So for every employee that's disengaged at this level, you're losing $20,000 annually. I put the fire effect to emphasize this. I don't like burning money. If we're looking at a team of 100 people, for example, And we're saying, just imagine all those people are getting paid $60,000. This is saying a team out of 100 people, you're only operating with 15% really, because 85% of people are disengaged. And those 85%, that money is just gone, because you're basically 85 people times 20,000 will be $1.7 million a year. And that seemed like a massive number for me. So I like to think about, man, $144,000 a month, or 5,000, or about $5,000 a day. I don't know about you, but either one of those numbers upsets me. Like, I don't want to be throwing away any kind of money like this. And it's not necessarily their fault. I'm not going to put this on employees. What we're saying here is, because those gaps exist, it becomes a systematic issue. And sometimes people will tell us, Kemi, that's not happening in our organization. We're like, okay, maybe that's not. But we found just in our own research that about 50% of employees do not feel safe in their organization. So maybe your organization is the anomaly. Maybe you even have a small team like, no, we're totally fine. But we'll ask you here, what's the cost of not knowing? This is where we go back to assess before you make a mess. If you don't check in at all, you're likely to make a mess, assuming the best. I'd rather check in and get some actual data. So when we're talking about measuring trust here, we'll give you a few questions that you can include into your next assessment. And you can do these on a Likert scale. So for example, giving them people a chance to share on a scale of 1 to 10, my voice is heard and included in decisions that directly impact me. They don't have to be included in every single decision, but definitely the ones that directly impact them. That our organization provides adequate information about important issues and or changes. That our organization effectively takes action to improve or resolve issues based on feedback that I provide or others provide. That my management team / leadership team is transparent. This is always a big one. It's always interesting to reflect on. And then I trust my coworkers, or I trust my team. If you want to measure trust, we got to actually ask about it. And this one is one of my favorite questions, because we're not here just to make up problems or only ask about the negative things, right? We give people a chance to rate on a scale of 1 to 10. And if they're ever at the higher levels, we ask them, for example, what positive factors are contributing to your scores? And what negative factors are contributing to your scores? That way you get a whole picture and are able to take action to continue what you're doing well and fix what might be broken. So here's what it might look like. This is a snapshot from one organization we worked with last year. So when we asked them this question, my voice is heard and included in conversations or decisions that directly impact me. It was interesting to see, even in the small team, this is 11 people, right? You said before, a lot of organizations are small businesses. So you had one person who's on the far left who said they strongly disagree. And you had a one person who's on the far right said they strongly agree. And you have everybody scattered in the middle. And this happens all the time, where we see some people who, you have a great deal of folks who are here and they feel like the organization is perfectly safe, it's perfectly trusting, but then you have a lot of folks who are struggling and they get left behind. That's what we're saying before. However, when we look at these DEI gaps, this organization was struggling in their inclusion and protection. So this is what we're saying. We want to connect these dots all together, but we help them in the course of 3 months tip the scale to where more of their employees, more of their team members were saying that they strongly agree that their voice is heard and included. And notice, it's not 100%. We're not even asking for 100%. We're asking for continual progress and improvement. This is, again, how you build that crisis-proof trust. Because imagine a group of 100 people. Imagine if you had an organization of 100 people. We talk about scaling. People want to have more team. It's like, all right, more team equals more problems sometimes. So it's interesting. What if you had about 10, 20, 30, 40 of your people feeling like their voice is not included? If you're one of those 40, would you actually participate in your organization, or would you just phone it in? Zoom it in, I guess, at this point. We want to help you either way, get more people on this side of the conversation, of this side of the ratings. And so again, you can take a screenshot. These are some of our favorite questions as we're looking at assessments, to build out an assessment that actually measures trust and safety, but also gives us the ability to act on it. So as you take that closes out our assessment portion. That was the longest one. The rest of them will be shorter to help you. Once you get the data, what do you do about it, right? What do I actually do about it? The first thing we're going to tell you is to strategize. And the reason we talk about strategizing is because your culture is happening by default or by design. By default, it's generally one of exclusion. It's one of mistrust. By design, just like you design your products to succeed, you design your profits to succeed. We got to actually design our culture to succeed, where people can trust each other, where they know who to ask for help, where they know what to do when things get difficult. Which one would you prefer? Put the word default or design in the chat. Would you want a culture by default or culture by design? I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. And when we're doing culture by design, which is what most of y'all are saying in chat, fantastic, we have to understand that this is a snapshot of the potential diversity in your organization. So United Way of Asheville says that we have these different layers. And if we just talk about race equity, that's just one layer. Holy moly, right? Look at this. And then we start to expand and saying this intersection, these intersections are happening in your organization right now and will continue to expand as the world diversifies. So whether you see a certain skin color in your organization or not, you're still having a diversity and you have to be able to address that and continue to evolve it. So this brings us to a term that many people have not heard, which is called cultural equity. It's creating a culture of equity, a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion, where we're making a systematic effort to advance people of all diversities in your organization. So this goes beyond saying we're just going to work on anti-racism or racial equity. It's saying, yeah, we're going to work on racial equity. We're going to work on gender equity. We're going to make sure that anybody who comes to our organization, in honor of them, they're going to be able to succeed in our organization. And I want to point this out, right? You hire these folks, right? They're not just like random people rolling off the street. Like you are hiring these folks to be your team members, make sure they have a pathway to succeed in the organization. And as we were talking about being strategic in this process, once you assess and you get information from your team, we encourage you to use it as soon as possible. This is coming from Workify that shows that assessments or the feedback from our employees has a half-life. The longer we take to act on it, the lower it becomes in effectiveness, but also the lower the trust is. When people say our employees don't fill out surveys, I'm like, okay, when's the last time you took action on a survey? They say, oh, we act about every 90 days, but look at this. It's already at 60%. Anything beyond that, you're just like, all right, might as well just have another survey because it's not going to help at this point. So we're encouraging people to act within and when I say act, we'll talk about that in a moment. The idea of doing it within the 30 to even 45-day range, like 90 is, if you like 60%, which is like, an F in school that you can go for it, I would rather kind of go to the A's and the B's up here to make sure that we can actually be more successful with the data. And it's important that as we're strategizing around the information we gather, we call them, when we do this for organizations, we call them DEI by design strategy sessions. So we're actively making sure that we are designing the DEI initiatives and we're doing this strategically. So here's some questions I want you to consider as you are planning your strategy and planning your strategy sessions is, how do we use the assessment data to inform our planning? Once we have data, what are we going to do with it? And what's interesting is, why do we need to make the change now? The data will show you a gap. And as you prioritize that, it's important to ask, why do you need to do it now? Especially if it's shifting some of your priorities, it's about reprioritizing. And what are the top 3 ways to make our next steps actionable? Whenever we do these DEI by design sessions, we're not going to give you a 20-point plan. It's like, what can you do in the next quarter to start to close these gaps? And that way people actually feel the difference. And we'll talk about how that continues to boost motivation, but we want to make it tangible right now. So that way we stop just talking and we take more action. And then this is also for help us determine what is our organizational change rate, right? Our OCR. If your organization changes slowly, that is fine, because the bigger your group is, the slower it generally takes to change. How do we incorporate that into our plan to make it realistic? Some employees are frustrated just because things change so slowly, but there's a lack of communication in this process. So how do we actually make a realistic implementation timeline? And let's talk about this right now. What would prevent us the change from happening? Because if we think about all these objections and potential roadblocks, we can actually problem solve. Whoa. We can actually problem solve. What a big, what is it? In business, we only get paid to solve problems. for our clients. What's interesting is we're using the same mindset to solve problems for our employees, for our teams, for our organization. And then here's last one or two more. How we handle setbacks, and how can we make our strategy and goals equitable? How do we make our goals fair? If you've never done these things before, it's okay to start small with the big picture in mind, but make sure that it's fair so that people can actually be a part of it. So go ahead and screenshot that. As I said, like now we're going to start moving a little quicker because each section is going to build on the next one. And I appreciate all your comments in the chat. This is awesome. And so we have, so that closes out our strategize portion. So we're going to assess, strategize, and then train. What I love about training, we actually have to train people on how to be a part of our strategy. What's interesting is a lot of times we'll hear terms like microaggressions. When you talk about what is going to derail your strategies, oftentimes these microaggressions where people are disengaged, and so they start to, I'll try to figure out what's the best way to say it, start like talking crap about your initiative or about DEI or about these new people and how it's their fault, like scapegoating. All those things are microaggressions. So it's important that we have to understand that is going to happen unless we are training our team, training our leaders to actually navigate that. So the way that we do this is we want to shift microaggressions to microprogressions. Shift microaggressions to microprogressions to make sure we can take a progressive approach that builds upon each other. So we're not asking you to go for 100% right out the gate. We're helping you take it step by step. And so when we do this, we call it microprogression action classes. This is where we focus straight up on what actions need to happen. And how do we integrate this into our sales calls, into our customer service trainings, into our leadership trainings to make sure that this is infused into our organization. And in order to do that, we have to be focusing on low burden, but high impact skills. Right now, a lot of people are having DEI as a conversation that's high burden, low impact. I don't know about you, but that's frustrating. So we're going to train folks to have the low burden, high impact skills. So just as a snapshot of some of the types of trainings that we're doing with folks, replacing bias with new beliefs, right? People have a lot of implicit bias trainings, but are they teaching people to replace that with new beliefs? And how do we structurally make that happen? That we have unbiased recruiting and interview, that we're creating virtual safe spaces and brave spaces. We're using trauma-informed support techniques to help our team navigate this life where we're still separated and we have no idea when this is going to be over. You know, how are we giving and receiving strength-based feedback? DEI for virtual town halls to make sure the town halls are much more engaging, right? And you can see the list. I love this one here about, motivating diverse teams and de-escalating defensiveness and increasing team resilience. Those are the things that I enjoy the most. So just know that DEI is not just for minorities. And when you actually use diversity, equity, inclusion as a solution framework in your business, it helps your whole team. That resilience your team needs to then become crisis proof. DEI is a pathway to be able to build that out in your organization. And notice that all of these are focusing on practice over policy. Practice over policy. Policy helps your organization. Absolutely. That's going to help you stay compliant. I mean, if we look at one policy, for example, being the speed limit, right? If the speed limit is 55, how fast are you driving? Is anybody driving 55, or maybe you're going 60, 65, 70, 80? Yeah, you don't have to snitch on yourself, right? But the idea here is that that's a policy that we all are affected by, but not everybody follows the speed limit. So it's important that, are we training people to have the practices that also inform our policies and strengthen our strategies? That's what we do when we're looking at the training section. And when you are building out a training, it's important that you're asking yourself these same questions that we ask ourselves. So once you have a strategy, what skills or competencies are required to act on this strategy? Like what do our people actually need to do what we're asking them to do? How do we assess our team skill level? Right? A lot of DEI trainings are teaching to the middle, and that's not how we learn. If we're just constantly being teaching to the middle, we lose people who are, not who are further behind. We also lose people who are further ahead. And then now everybody's frustrated. Maybe the people in the middle are like, great, I got exactly what I needed. No, we want to be able to reach people at the beginning, at the intermediary, and also at the advanced level. This is part of the reason that I'm just giving you the list of questions that we generally asking ourselves. So as you're going through and you're thinking about what you need to apply, you can pick and choose what makes the most sense for you. And then how do we make the sessions accessible to all team members? For example, we are recording this, so we'll be able to send it out, but it's also like closed captioning and other things that are making sure people can be a part of the training. How do we accommodate for diverse learning styles? Or I come from the education, that's what my degrees are in, brain-based teaching and learning. I'll tell you right now, especially when we're doing online training, a lot of people are disengaged because it's not meeting their learning styles. How do we have an engaging type of presentation that keeps people rolling with us, but also make sure that they actually get what they need to learn the skill we want them to learn? And what is our post-training support system for skill progression? If we're teaching folks things and then not giving them the chance to practice or giving them a structure to practice, we're kind of setting them up for failure. So we want to make sure we're giving people an ability to practice. So those are the questions for the train portion. You can go ahead and screenshot that. For those of you who are screenshot, I see people pulling out their cameras and stuff. So I want to give you an opportunity to do that. Want to make sure this is helpful and valuable. And as we go to the last portion, which is celebrate. I want to first and foremost celebrate y'all for sticking with this training and sticking with this conversation. And the reason we celebrate, as I said earlier, it's not just like a kumbaya fluffy kind of thing. It's saying that for in business, but also in our lives, what we celebrate, we emanate. The things that we actually care about to celebrate, that we call our friends about, that we invite people to come and see, those are the things that mean the most to us. What's interesting is we can do all this around DEI, but we're not celebrating the progress. If an organization does well, we just don't even hear about it. That's the part that's wild. And maybe your celebrations are not necessarily Zoom calls where it's a dance party. You don't have to have all that. But what are you doing to actually enjoy the process? This is a long road, by the way. What are you doing to enjoy the process? And because we know everyone celebrates differently, what we help clients determine is what we call the PSC method. PSC stands for push, support, celebrate. Most organizations are already doing the push part, are already doing that. But then are we talking to our folks about what support they need and how they want to be celebrated in the process and what that looks like on a daily? What are the small things we're doing on a day-to-day? Again, these are micro progressions. What does that look like on a week, especially when you have a big week and there's a lot going on? What about monthly? What about quarterly? Once a quarter, what are we doing as a team to celebrate diversity in our organization, to celebrate that we're making progress? We don't have annually on the air. I mean, I don't know, man, 2020 just like blew my mind on what annual planning even means anymore. But I think when you make it to the end of the year, celebrate however you want to celebrate, right? But the point being, even if you just map it out every quarter, this would be huge for your team. And this is how we truly start to show people that we are measuring and celebrating our progress. And so if you're thinking about how you build out your own ability to motivate and celebrate your team, we'll ask you right here, right? How can we measure, communicate, and appreciate progress? Again, we're not just putting trophies. We're not just saying, hey, participation. It's like, no, we're saying we're measuring progress. That's one of the keys to motivating people, is to show them progress, and most importantly, how their efforts are contributing to that progress. So how do we leverage progress to deepen our why for DEI? This is what I was telling you before. When you start small, you're able to continue to build big. It's better than starting big and just failing and then no one wants to be a part of your DEI initiative. Start small and keep building. What celebrations will help maintain momentum? I said momentum is one of the best things you can have as a team as you keep on building and growing, especially as you recruit new people. This is one of my favorite questions. How do people want to be honored for their contributions? I like asking this as an interview question too. How do you want to be honored for a job well done? So I know when you're coming onto a team, how do I support you and give you the proper thanks that you want when you do the job that I'm asking you to do? What does it look like to support each other moving forward? And then what does it look like to hold each other accountable? Now notice the word support came on there first. Right? A lot of folks will tell me in a training like this, Kimmy, how do we hold people accountable? And I ask, how are you supporting them first? to hold me accountable without any support or without any kind of relationship, that feels like at best micromanaging, at worst, you're trying to force me to do something that you never taught me or showed me how to do. I don't know about you, but even as somebody who's a pretty kind person, I can get very frustrated if someone's only trying to hold me accountable, which sounds different and looks different to every person. But when we're talking about how do we support each other, then whenever you have to hold me accountable, if I make a mistake or something, I know it's coming from a place of support. That's the difference. So how do we support each other moving forward? How do we hold each other accountable? So that is a snapshot of our cultural equity framework to assess, strategize, train, and celebrate. This is how you get a complete action. If you're just doing one of these, you're doing an incomplete action. I'd rather you have a complete action so you can actually get a complete ROI on your DEI initiatives. All right, I got you. So here's what the request. There you go. Screenshot opportunity. Thank you for letting me know what you need. There you go. Screenshot opportunity. And as we bring this back up here, I just want to recover the objectives, right? We just covered it quite a bit. So as your mind is reprocessing this, is that in this time, we talked to you about how to measure trust in your company culture so you can advance equity without offending people. And the reason we say it like that is people say, I just want folks to give me the benefit of the doubt. That doesn't, I don't even know how to like, that doesn't make sense for me. Like, again, as an educator, it's like our minds think in the direction that we want to go. So if I tell you, for example, don't look at red in my room, don't look at red, you start to look at red. But if I tell you, look right here, look at me in the eyes, I want to focus your attention right here, look at me in the eyes. So when we're talking about not offending people, I'm going to tell you, I want to make sure we give each other the benefit of trust. But if I say something and I say the wrong thing, that you trust me enough to talk to me about it, that it doesn't become something that shows up on social media before we actually had a chance to talk. That's a completely different operating system than a lot of businesses have right now. So that's what we're talking about, to make sure that you can do this without offending people or making things worse. And that we want to make the most of your DEI initiative. So we're talking to you about how to use strategy, how to use assessments to drive strategy so you come up with the right solutions at the right time. And then we also shared how you can engage your employees in DEI as a positive experience that empowers them with the high impact, low burden skills. Right? This is that training section. That way we help you actually reach your goals. So that is a snapshot of our cultural equity accelerator. And people generally ask after we show something like this, Kemi, can you please help our organization do that? We're like, absolutely. We help organizations like you every day. This is why we're on this mission to help 5 million business leaders do this by 2030, because it's so confusing and frustrating to do it by yourself, but we're here to help. And as we give a snapshot and we close out here, we were talking about the DEI executive coaching, the organizational assessments, the DEI by design strategy sessions, and the micro progression action classes. And we have a variety of services around the done for you, where we go in and do it for you, where the done with you, where we are walking alongside you to make sure that you can continue in your organization, and the do it yourself, where we teach you similar to this, where we dive in a little bit deeper and that you can go back and do it in your organization. Now, we already have your emails, so we will send you this recording as well as the invitation to follow up with us if you would like to. But I do want to say thank you for taking the time to listen. And I just love to see the people's smiles and the screenshots as people were grabbing. And as we transition into the Q&A, I know some people may have to leave, but I will share that, again, when we're looking at this work being so complicated, let's bring it back to something simple, that equity is about making things fair. And as you learn how to make things in your organization fair for one group, that becomes a pathway to make it fair for more people. So equity right here is a pathway to equity everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very helpful, detailed, and as I'm sure as a business professional, I can connect to a lot of those things, and business owners who are doing this daily thing And when they will see this from their perspective, it will really be an eye-opening for them to look at from a different point of view and to introduce this in their daily lives. And this is very helpful. Thank you so much. Before we go forward, I would uh, like everyone to hear from an other resource partner we have. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrect. You can correct me. Laquina, is Laquina here? Can you unmute Laquina Bailey from City of Richmond? Is it possible we can unmute her and listen from her?
Yep, should be good to go now.
Can you hear me?
All right, she just muted herself. I think we got to give you permission to unmute again. You should be good to go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I think I had to do something on my device. I apologize. My boss called me in the middle of this as well. So I'm Lockheed Hannah Bailey. I am also known as Q. I'm the program manager for the Office of Minority Business Development here in the city of Richmond. And my core responsibility is to provide business development assistance to small businesses, whether you are a upcoming entrepreneur or you have been in business for years. Some of the ways that we do that at the city is through our one-on-one business consultations, which I conduct, as well as a variety of business development virtual courses that we provide, whether it's myself teaching it or I have subject matter experts that come on and teach it. For instance, we just hosted a seminar about PPP updates, in which we had Carl Noblock come through and walk through the application, the lenders that are involved, and gave the attendees the opportunity to ask questions that they can't get through to SBA. We also have our own minority business database in which we register minority firms. One of our requirements is that your firm is SWAM certified or DBE certified with SBSD, because for the City of Richmond's construction projects, we count SWAM for minority participation credit. Also, we have as far as resources, besides the business development, we have our own loan programs that we work through the Department of Economic Development with the City of Richmond and the EDA board, in which we have 4 different loan programs. One is a construction-based contractors assistance program, in which we use your City of Richmond contract as collateral to loan against in case you need threshold money for the project, just general capital, something maybe to help you with supplies. Also, we have our micro loan program, which is up to $50,000 for operational money, whether it's startup or if it's just operational capital for your current business. We have a citywide loan that goes up to $250,000 that can also be used for an array of things. It just can't be used for any type of acquisition. So it can't be used to purchase or lease a building or for construction purposes. And then lastly, we have a revolving loan that is about $500,000 plus, and the same stipulations, you just cannot use it for acquisition. Our loan programs don't exceed 6% in interest, which is absolutely amazing because it beats some of the banks. We work closely with a couple of our sister partners, whether it's for certification or if it's just exchange of business development assistance as well. The loan programs are specifically for Richmond-based businesses, but my services as far as business development are open to any and everyone that needs the assistance. And I think I covered that question. Yes, because that was a question in the chat.
That sounds great. And what I will do is that I will also send you a video recording for this session. And if you want to do this complete session separately for the city of Richmond, I will share Kemi um, contact, and we are happy to work with you to take
Yes.
event for the city of Richmond folks. Kemi, back to you. Um, anyone, there are a lot of questions about if you can share the slides or you can share the video. Can you tell us how will you share email or will you give a video, and how folks can contact you back if they have like a specific question, because a lot of people might not ask specific question they have about their organization openly. So if they want to ask you or want some kind of guidance, how they can reach out?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So thank you. And the way we'll do this is, I believe you said we will get everyone who registered, will get your email. So we'll send you a recording of this, so that way you can have and we'll clean it up. So we had some technical issues earlier. So we'll take care of all of that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we don't share the slide. So as you go through, you can take the screen capture. In that email, when we send it out, we'll also include our contact information. And that way you can ask your private questions. And one thing we do is, as I mentioned, since we have a variety of ways that we help organizations go through the executive coaching, the DEI by design strategy sessions, the assessments, and the action classes, offer a 30-minute right fit call. So we can get on a call with me and see what is the right fit for your organization, depending on where you're at and your resources. That way we can help you to advance equity, and especially to integrate DEI into those 8 essential business areas we discussed earlier.
Okay. And do you have some kind of training for the employees,
Absolutely.
team members, and that is separate from this one?
Yeah, so this one we wanted to focus on the high level, as you and I spoke about, making sure that we can help organizations see the big picture and how to apply it. And from each one of those, each one of these, as we shared earlier, we'll have we can have trainings for the employees and separate that employee trainings for the leaders and so on. Because the point for us would be, let's do an assessment and find out where the gaps are. And that way we can give you exactly what you need, because we don't want to, we could sell you lots of things, but we only want to provide you what you need to get the greatest ROI on your initiative. So the short answer to your question is absolutely. Can train your employees, can train your managers, and provide them with the resources they need to really enact the strategic goals that you have in mind.
Okay. And folks, if you have any question, you can type in a chat box, and we will be here to answer those. And I would like to thank everyone from the behalf of Virginia Department of Small Business and Supplier Diversity. I would like to thank our partners, Virginia Tech. Desha, you want to say something at the... Oh, she's muted.
Yes, thank you all so much for having me today. And I put my email in the chat box if anyone would like to discuss further or have any questions for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Lamina had a question, so I'll bring Lamina up. So thank you both here. I'm going to remove you from the spotlight. A lot going on, but so thank you for your patience, and then we'll add
Yeah, that's great to hear me.
Yes, there you go.
All right, wonderful. I was going to type the questions for Kimmy.
Yes.
If Kimmy, can you go back to your slide where you were talking about the equity pathway?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have different pillars of identifying the equity pathway. And I saw that there are different ratios. Do you remember that slide that you have the yes?
Mm-hmm.
And the previous slide, you had like in each
pillar, there are different column and different ratio.
I think you're talking about you're talking about
When you
this one
started.
here. When I
No, not that one.
started.
You
Are you
started.
talking about this?
No. Yeah.
And then are you talking about this one, or are we talking about feedback, or you're saying?
No, I'm talking about the graph that when you identify the pathway of legal, economic. No,
So, yeah,
I think it's before that.
I mean, this is
Yes,
what I was showing you
legal. Yeah,
before.
that's exactly. If you see here, you said, I cannot see because it's too tiny. I think career takes the highest ratio. From where you got that ratios? So you have
It's not that
legal,
necessarily
you have career.
So what we were saying in this one here is that for us as organizational leaders, we are most responsible for career equity. So when we go about elevating it to the highest level, because what we're responsible for, we can in turn help people raise the other areas of their lives.
Okay.
So it was more of a saying that this is not how it automatically happens, but if we as leaders are giving people an ability to go all the way to the top in our organizations, we also are strengthening their ability to raise equity in other areas of their lives.
I understand that. So the other pillars, they don't have like a specific ratios, just like an example, correct? So if you're talking about the economic or social or legal, it's not based on data. It's just like a graph to highlight on the career pillar.
Yes, I believe.
All
so
right.
If I repeat that, there's not to say this is a 80%. There's not specific ratios. It's saying that as we focus on giving the whole pathway in our organizations, we will help people in those other areas of their lives. However, we are not like directly responsible for all of those other peers. So it was or those tiers. So it's an attempt to help people focus our attention on where we have the most influence and ability to make an impact.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it.
And
Great presentation. I've learned a lot.
I saw you at the
Wonderful.
top left of my screen. You're like all in with us. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it, Kemi. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So any other questions? I'm happy to go back to any slides that we just did there. We have time. We have about 8 minutes left. So we have time for maybe 2 more questions. What do you got? So I see there's quite a bit of folks on the call. And as was mentioned earlier, you can actually ask a question privately. If you don't necessarily want to ask it directly in front of everybody, you can send a private message to me in the chat here, and then I will be able to answer that for you in this call.
There's no other question. I ask you how you do the assessment. Are you doing when you said that we are happy to meet your organization? Are you doing like a survey or an interview? How you do your assessment in general, and how long it will take? Great questions. So when we're looking at the assessment, we will generally start with a self-assessment survey, and then I can get into the specifics, but we kind of talk about a multi-level type of experience. So level 1 would be a self-assessment. And then as we go to level 2 and 3, it involves more stakeholder interviews. Or so if we're seeing a big issue, or we're seeing that we need to find out more information, we will do stakeholder interviews. And then the highest level includes reviewing your actual written documents and your written communications. So that requires a little bit more permission from the organization. So that's why we kind of tier it out in these steps to make sure, again, meet you where you're at and what you have time for, as well as what you have resources for. And this is also important too, based on the levels of trust in your organization. Some things may be required, or some things may not be possible, right? Sometimes when people have a very low level of trust, even the written assessments are more basic, because people are less likely to share this descriptive information. So it's important that as we're starting to assess, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to assessment. So for those of you who are buying kind of just assessments that you can get offline and go apply it, I would say to really be careful about the questions that you're asking. I think Workify said that it's never been easier to send out a bad assessment, right? As we get all these different tools, we can just send out these assessments. So make sure that you're customizing the assessment for your organization to ask the questions that you need to make sure you're taking care of your people. So thank you for that question.
Let's see. How do you address lack of diversity in your pipeline of career applicants? So that's a multi-tier question, Mindy. Just gonna toss that out. Where did Mindy go? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. So our problem is lack of diversity on our team, and we're desperate to be more diverse. And our hiring manager always looks to, the applications that come in are all the same demographic. So how do we, address that? Like, how do we back into getting more people in front of our hiring process?
I appreciate you asking that. And I will ask you a couple of questions in return that you don't have to answer directly right now. I've been anytime someone brings this up, so it's not personal to you, I'll ask them like, what's inspiring you to hire diversely? Right? And just as a question for us to get clear on our why, right? Because some people, and not speaking to you, not saying that this is what you're doing, some people are seeking quotas and other people can feel that, right? So if just as we get clear on our why, that also helps us get clear on our how. And so as we get clear on our question, I'm happy to jump on like a private call with you if you want to talk deeper about this. So then as we going back to these equity pathways we were talking about before, you're exactly on point where you're saying that there's a lack of access and awareness, right? And that's that first piece. So I would start to find out, how are you making people aware of your opportunities? And also, how are you engaging in those communities, right? Because those communities may not trust you or your organization. And again, I'm not speaking just to Mindy here. I'm talking to any organization that's having these issues. If we're looking at diversifying our recruiting, I would start with, what is our actual intention for doing so? And then how do we increase the awareness of our opportunities in the communities that are not applying? And as we go about doing this, we've actually been looking for specific tools for diverse recruiting platforms. For example, like Upwork, we were trying to find things that are more diverse than Upwork. So as we continue to find out, we're happy to share those resources. We have not found one that we're satisfied with yet. But the goal is, especially if you're recruiting locally, how are you increasing your awareness in a way that's authentic? Again, if it's feeling like it's a quota thing, people will be able to pick that up right from the beginning. If it's feeling like it's an authentic thing, it allows you to grow it more organically. And so in the last piece I will share, going back to the organizational change rate, for example, if you're starting at 0, for example, if you have like 0 Black people, for example, what does it look like to recruit 1?
Right, because I've been watching so many of these videos recently, and we're a company with a lack of diversity in an industry with lack of diversity. And, we talk about representation, and a potential applicant looking at my website and not seeing anyone who looks like them. That in and of itself is a detractor from them wanting to step forward and apply, right? So, but if we're at ground zero, how can we
Mindy,
move beyond that?
I'm sorry, are you from construction industry?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to ask a lot of identifying info on the call.
That is one of the industry that is struggling because of the nature of the work. What is your industry?
We are in organizing and productivity.
I'd like to make a comment. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. I'm Dakota Mitchell, and I just want to address the question, the young lady, I'm sorry, I can't catch your name, that you're having struggles with finding diversity. So without knowing your industry, there are people in every culture that have gifts and talents and skills in every industry. So it really doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you visit college campuses, if you go to organizations that have a really strong, diverse population that are competitors of yours or that are similar to yours, you will see that this is not as much of a challenge to find people that are different and diverse to join your team. You may have had practices in place where you go through the same routine and therefore you find the same results. But this would definitely be a great opportunity. And Kimmy has a phenomenal way of presenting the sometimes ostensible, challenging topics, and he has done it with great ease, confidence, and to make everyone feel comfortable in talking about it. So he asked you a very tough question, which is, what's your intention? Phenomenal question, because that energy behind your intention really creates the ability for you to be successful in driving in diverse populations. So I just wanted to share that I understand it may be challenging only because that your routine that has been up until this point has been the same. So you've been getting the same thing because you've been going about it the same way. But this opportunity with Kimmy presenting the DEI presentation will maybe allow there to be some alternative ways that you could think about how you do your recruitment process, and also where you go and what are you looking at when you are trying to find diverse populations.
Thank you, Dakota. I appreciate you. And so, yeah, and I think that's a powerful one to close out on too, as people are, that's the $1 million question. And I love that recap you just gave there, Dakota. And as we are, I did forget your name too, as I'm like really focusing on the question that we're answering here. Mindy, there you go, Mindy. So as exactly was there. And what I will tell people, I tell folks all the time, when you're working on your recruiting, absolutely, it's a slower go process, right? Just know that, because there's a lot of things that are out of your control when you're recruiting somebody that you don't even know yet. I would also encourage you to focus on how are we strengthening the trust and safety and belonging in our organization, because that's another piece that when folks, once you actually get them in the organization, whoever the diverse person you're looking for, right? It doesn't just have to be based on skin color. Are they going to feel a sense of inclusion and belonging? You have to prep that before they get there. If you're prepping that while they're there, holy crap, it becomes way more intense. So as you are expanding your awareness, right? So that's the level that you're talking about. As you're expanding your awareness of making sure people in different communities understand who you are as an organization and what you're there to offer them, and how you're there to support them, I would encourage you that right now you can see even a faster ROI by making sure you're truly increasing the safety and belonging in your organization. So as soon as you get the people you're looking for, they will feel safe and they will feel like they can thrive in your organization as well. So
Great, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you for that, Mindy. And like I said, we'll send you via email the ability to get in touch with us, because and I appreciate folks. I'll just share this as we close out. It's been one of my favorite things that people, when I'm usually on one-on-one calls, they're asking these hard questions, and I'm just asking y'all, where do you get a chance to ask these questions and get positive responses? If you don't have that kind of space, please reach out to us. We're happy to help to support you, and not only offering that space, but how do you create that for your employees and your team, because they're asking the same questions. And if they don't ask it to you, and they don't ask it in a healthy way, I promise you they're not having healthy conversations about it elsewhere, based at least on our experience. So thank you for asking that, Mindy, and really diving in deep to something that is impacting so many organizations. We're glad we can serve y'all here, and then we will pass the mic back one more time and then start to close out our session. So any final words?
Yeah, and I would reply back on the same issue, which Mindy is highlighting. The businesses that we work with, human resource is a huge challenge for them, like hiring the right person, retaining employees, and anything related to human resource like diverse hiring there's a little bit misconnection that what we have identified is that a small business owner is working and wearing different hats. He's HR manager, he's product manager, he's a marketing person. So we are working to bring trainings like this and we would love to bring some kind of training on on recruitment and selection for businesses who would like to get more understanding on that topic. But this is I'm from Southwest Virginia, and we work with businesses in Virginia, and this is one of the really area where a lot of businesses are struggling. So thank you for highlighting this, Mindy. We will look forward in finding the right resource, educational resource, training resource, and then bring that back. And Kimmy will definitely will help us in that process.
Absolutely. Thank you for that recap. And because a couple people asked, I just put that Right Fit call link in the chat right now. So even though we're closing out right now, you can have that. Go ahead and copy it out of the chat for those of you who want it. And then we'll close out for now. I'm glad that you are wanting more, because we talked about doing more of these. So this is a good sign, right? And so the rest of y'all, you're welcome to grab the link. We'll send you the follow-up information via email. And again, thank you so much for the time and the attention, these powerful questions. And thank you for your commitment to advancing equity in your organization. We'll see you soon, everyone.